Okay, hello everyone. We did have a few technical difficulties to start out with, but as any live thing that happens, usually that happens, especially when you've got me running the camera and the IT. But anyways, we're gonna go ahead and get started here. I've got Cooper Newcomb, Glen Martin, Rob Zielinski on here, and we're all going to kind of go over the right approach to your show goats. And so we'll switch on over to the agenda for today. So starting off, we'll cover Advancer 360 and NewCo Goat, which are our two new feeds to hit the market here in April. And we're really going to cover how you feed those and then also just the nutritional components behind that. And then along with that, we'll transition into some supplement talk, daily care, bracing, and exercise. So as I introduced them already, these are the guys that are going to be on the call with me today, and I'll go ahead and let them introduce themselves.
Make sure I'm off mute here. Certainly a pleasure to be here with you guys. I am out of Elk City, Oklahoma. Actually raise a bunch of sheep, and then we show goats and help trade a few goats, along with Glen and Cooper Bound and a few other guys that are a lot more knowledgeable than I am, but I am certainly learning from these guys, and it's been a joy to feed goats and learn about them and sit here and watch these feed changes work and utilizing these things. So certainly a pleasure to be on here to help, influence you and trying to get you in the right direction. And I guess we're doing this tonight as much to try to help you folks out there and understand why we're doing what we're doing as far as the Show-Rite team goes. And I'll go ahead and let Glenn introduce himself here.
I'm Glen Martin, Mason, Texas, Show-Rite Influential. Been with Show-Rite helping on the goat feed side for many years. I think been 18 now that I've worked in this capacity and helped with that. Awful good crew, and pleasure to be on tonight, visit with you about feeds and feeding and some other things involving your project as well.
I'm Rob Zielinski, and my primary responsibilities are small ruminant nutritionist for Hubbard. I get the good fortune of working with this really talented and progressive Show-Rite crew on helping them put together all the formulas for the small ruminant side of the equation. Happy to have everybody with us tonight, and certainly look forward to communicating back and forth and getting your questions answered so that you can have a successful feeding and showing season.
And then I'm Bailey Irick, the Show-Rite marketing lead, and I basically have more of a pig background, but I get to kind of handle all things, all species from a marketing perspective for Show-Rite. And so I will also be moderating the comments so I can see all your guys' comments. So when you have questions, we'll make sure that we have breaks in between kind of the different topic areas, and we'll get those questions answered for you. So go ahead and drop those in the comments, whether you're on YouTube or Facebook. I can see both. And we're going to go ahead and transition over to our Advancer 360. So go ahead, Glenn, kick it off.
Well, I'm going to visit just briefly about the history of how we came to where we're at in this part of the ball game with Show-Rite. We started out years ago working on this Advancer feed, which frankly was the first of its kind and stood the test of time. And then as new technologies come along, we've transitioned and actually made some slight ration changes with the Advancer Plus, which many of you that are on, most of you that are on, have fed successfully over the years. And then once again now, here we are with more cutting edge technology, things that Rob can tell us actually more about, and transition once again, technically less formula change, if you will, per se, from Advancer Plus to 360, but with added technologies that we have now that we've never had before. Added enzymes, added vitamins to the product, added essential oils. And I love the profile of the 100% chelated organic minerals that we have in the product now. And it's been an exciting ride. I've a long time said this, for the number of goats that we fed nationwide, we have more winners than anybody, and that stood the test of time. And it's been fun for me. It's been awesome for my family. Great group to work with. Started years and years ago, and has continued. And here we are again, making another push to be as good as we can possibly be. I think Rob's going to talk to us about the changes that we made with our 360 and where we're at with that part of the game.
Simply put, Glenn, the Advancer Plus formula is the basis for 360. Nothing was taken out of the Advancer Plus formula. We only added some components that we really thought would enhance the feed and enhance the performance of your goats. The essential oils in this feed, I think, really have the capabilities of boosting intake, promoting good gut bacteria, certainly encouraging high-end feed efficiency in these goats and getting the kind of performance that we want. The enzymes are going to help us with breakdown and utilization of protein and energy. It's just as simple as that. One thing that I certainly failed to mention on the essential oils, and probably the most important component of it, is building that strong immune response to get the kind of performance that we want. The essential oils have just ultimately been proven time and time again. And this one that we've got in here called Glen is going to be one that I think is going to really rise us to the top in terms of our immune system defense. Glenn already talked about the values of the increased vitamins, and the zinc, the cobalt, the copper, and manganese in this is 100% chelated. So they're all organic trace minerals bound for good and productive use. So you're going to get a lot of value out of every bite from a vitamin and mineral perspective of Advancer 360. Moving on to NewCo Goat for Cooper.
For sure, Rob. You want to touch on the med options that we have available?
Absolutely. And obviously, we like to give customers the option, right? Certain groups like to feed the Mon version, the Monensin version. This case, it's Monovent. The drug is the Monensin version, and then Dequinate on the Decox option for the Show-Rite Advancer.
I guess I get the privilege to open the floor for the NewCo Goat product. And this is one that I think is no surprise to a lot of our customers that we came out with this product, as NewCo Lamb has certainly set its path and set a standard out there for sheep feeds. And along with, as Glen was speaking there, the amount of winners that we've had and the years that we've had NewCo Lamb feed available, and probably the amount of goats that we've even fed on that, truth be told, has been a lot of success stories. So that's something that we decided to go ahead and develop NewCo Goat off of the spin of NewCo Lamb, and it was the option to have a textured feed. And we sat behind a pelleted feed there for a very long time, and and it was obviously working and having a lot of success. But as we've changed and honestly showing goats now with a lot more belly and body and just having some more center rib to them, that's where we felt it was time to go ahead and come out with a textured feed and allow for some more consumption as well. But I'm going to let Rob go ahead and discuss the nutrition side of the NewCo Goat feed as well, and then we'll come back and talk a little bit about how we're feeding it, and Glenn and I will share our thoughts on both.
So much like the lamb product, the goat product was developed with, you can see the specs and read them there. We've used protein sources that are both readily available in the rumen, and some that bypass the rumen and are available for the animal in the small intestine. Those bypass proteins help get better performance bite for bite. The cold calories both come from starch sources and also from fat sources. Those cold calories are a nice blend of extra energy to add to the shine, the look, the growth, the performance of your goats. And one thing we like about texturized feeds is if they're really nice and wet with some wet molasses and some oils, palatability is usually very, very high. It's kind of refreshing for the customer when they open the bag and get a whiff of that. The goats should certainly like to go to that too. And once again, much like the lamb options, the goat options vary a little bit. We can feed the Monensin version, the monovet version of NewCo goat, and then we've got the 22/7 dequinate version of the goat feed, very similar to lamb.
Now we're just going to transition into a little bit of Glen and Cooper. They've had the chance to trial both of these products, and so they can kind of give their feedback on what they've seen.
Well, I'll start off on Advancer 360. We were tested that here at our house and with some of our feeders along the way through this last feeding period here in the South, using it on kind of market doe, dam type situation, slick sheared does, and then also along multiple weathers. And we had really good success with the product. Actually, in our group saw some increased feed intake of the pelleted product that I really wasn't expecting. And I think we had to rate back a little bit, maybe. I thought we had maybe a little better nutrient availability. We were able to get them to chub and convert just a little better. And actually, as we matured just a bit on that product, we rated that back just a little bit in terms of where it fit from a volume standpoint and the amount we fed from a ration standpoint. One thing about it, as always with the Advancer products and particularly Advancer Plus for many years, never get more muscle shape and expression than you do out of what I'm going to call a base or a complete feed than that feed. And once again, saw the same positives with that from an expression standpoint, a shape and touch and muscle texture.
I'll touch on NewCo goat, and just as Glenn did there, I think palatability is incredible on this textured feed. The one thing that we're getting is, consumption. A lot of guys are trying to utilize this as a crete feed on these young ones to get them started, get them off to the right start. And I think that's working really well. And there's been a lot of people very happy with it. Whenever they get their goats home, potentially starting on this as they're skinnier, they're trying to push on them a little bit, maybe trying to push on them for jackpots, or if you're showing at an early state fair, I think this is a great feed to try to get them to consume more and convert faster so that we can get them chubby, get them ready to show quicker if you're jackpotting, or if you're showing at a 6-month-old, at your state fair, and that's kind of your end point. We mentioned body and rib shape that we get, and that obviously is going to come off of the consumption side of things. You're going to see that. But, it's one thing to have body and rib and hold your shape. And I think your muscle shape, and without losing that and getting one plane and just, putting rib and body in them and then losing that shape. And that's ultimately where NewCo lamb feeds stood the test of time and stood apart from a lot of its contemporaries on the marketplace. And I think NewCo goat will be very similar. And that's what we saw there in our feeding period this last spring here, as we rounded out Oklahoma Youth Expo and the Texas Majors. And we maintained that handling quality. Now, I think the interesting side of this is whenever we utilize both these products on the same, project. And I know Glen's used it this way, and I've used it that way. And ultimately, you're going to get consumption. You can keep that efficiency and shape. The one thing that I would say about both these products, and I've always said this, is both of them are like eating a brownie. It doesn't take a lot, to make these things full and to feel, they're very dense. They're very dense feeds with a lot of, add-ins and nutrients in those feeds. So they're not a feed that you got to feed 3 pounds every feeding to try to get the good out of them. It doesn't take much to go a long ways. So, and that's the reason why we're not going to sit here and tell you we're the cheapest feed on the market. I mean, it's obvious whenever you go to the feed store. It's one of the higher end ones for a reason, because what we put in the bag, we haven't skipped any corners there or try to cut any corners, if you will. They are what they are, and they're very good. They're very efficient. Glen, you want to talk a little bit here about the way you guys maybe utilize it? You're obviously feeding a lot more goats than most people out there, and different scenarios whenever you're using these two together potentially.
Right. Well, we once again were able to utilize the NewCo goat. We had long been mixing some NewCo lamb with the advancer feeds when we needed more bulk, we needed more consumption. We wanted more body. We wanted more center bulk or cage, or wanted maybe to freshen our underline a bit. And so it was natural for us on those particular goats to utilize this NewCo goat in the same manner. Mix a lot on these projects, a lot of 50-50, where we're mixing that 360, that advancer 360 and the NewCo goat half and half, and going at them that way. We've also then, as we've gotten them to bulk, as we are seeing what we want to see, when they touch fresh enough, soft enough, if you will, in their forerib, and fresh enough down their back, we've rated that mixture back. We mixed 2/3 360 and 1/3 of that NewCo goat, and have actually transitioned it fully out on some that we just we try to look at them really regularly, and when they turn the corner and they get the type of bulk that we need to see, there's sometimes a time and place depending on the genetics and the game that we're playing. Maybe the judge we're showing to, that we find the need to just back out completely with the NewCo and come back in straight with our 360. Most of ours are fed as per my instruction to our Bryce and I, our feeders. Most of ours are fed 3 times a day. Quite a few feeders can't do that, and I get that. And twice a day is extremely important, that you be consistent with timing and how you utilize that. Here where we are, it's extremely gets hot fast. We've had multiple days over 100 degrees already, and so if we can improve consumption by breaking up our feedings, consistently feeding 3 times a day, we tend to like that. From a consumption standpoint, we're seeing extremely good consumption on, I'd say, the mid-size to bigger show goats from 50 pounds and more. A lot of those goats are eating 2 1/4 to 2 1/2 a day. We've actually shoved some a little bigger ones that were still skinny and got them to eat 3 to 3 1/4, which is pretty extreme on very, very nutrient dense feeds like we have here with the 360 and with the NewCo goat. So seen a lot of good things, a lot of positives here where we've been utilizing those.
And I could echo the same thoughts. I mean, that's essentially what we've done. And I think you brought up a great point on genetics there, because it's no secret these things have gotten more moderate. We've made them wider, more moderate, bigger rib. Make them bigger rib, it's easier to get them fat. And I would personally tell you that, if you've got a moderate, quick one, if you will, that's short to the ground and wide, he probably doesn't need a lot of textured feed. He probably needs to stay on the Advancer 360 program and keep him lean and keep him to grow. A goat will grow lean. A goat will not grow fat. So that's one thing to keep in mind as you're feeding these things early. And if we've always said, and I've done clinics with Glen, you got to figure out real quick if you want to be the jackpot guy or if you want to be the national show guy or the major guy, because there's a different feeding program. There's not very many of those goats that are going to do both. There's a very small handful, and I think Glen and I could probably name off. I can name sheep that's done it on one hand, and Glen could probably name goats that's done it on one hand, and we've fed a lot of them.
Yeah,
but if you're trying to feed them and push them early and you want them to get chubby and go jackpot,
I think is right. Pick your poison, remain focused, and really visualize where you want that animal to be at the most important time in your child's life, at the most important time in that animal's life, and then tailor that feed program to fit that genetic potential and to fit your desired point where you want to get to at the end.
Yeah. The last thing that I would add to that is if you have a late maturing, taller, skinnier goat that's not as wide, that's the type and kind that we're really going to push, NewCo goat at heavier and try to get them to shut down and open up and widen out and get asked to get some body and depth to them. So just wanted to throw those two things at you. We have a next slide, or are we on to questions here, Bailey?
We're going to go ahead and transition into some questions we've gotten from the group just over really Advancer 360 and NewCo Go. First one popping up here is, when is this available, and is it replacing Advancer Plus?
It is available now, and yes, it has replaced Advancer Plus. I think Glen and Rob did a great job explaining the fact that we didn't change anything. And I think that's the one thing that's very important to take from this is Advancer 360 is Advancer Plus with a few additions that we tried to make it better with, very few additions with absolutely zero subtractions.
Awesome.
Good way to put it.
Yeah. Another question that came up, and maybe Rob, if you want to touch on this, it was, I'm assuming it's, can you go into detail for the medicated versions or options?
Yeah, so the medicated options on Monensin are pretty specific. 20 grams per ton medicated feed. It can be the sole source of feed. On the Decox versions, FDA requires us to put how much Decox there is in those products. And they're either going to be at 13.6 milligrams per pound on the Advancer 360 or 22.7 on the NewCo Go.
Thank you. Another question that has been coming up has been a little bit of talk around textured feed. And so that being is, do goats like textured feed better, or why a textured feed?
Oh, they'd prefer it. Sometimes they sift a little bit, and that's one thing that we really worked on with the NewCo feeds in particular, is to eliminate the sifting where they eat what they like and leave the rest. A lot of times, what maybe doesn't taste as good is some of the best parts of any feed, and so they do. They like a textured feed. They like the way that tastes. The reason we have long time used pelleted only is because we really didn't want them to make that sift, and we were able to get a consistent feed into them with every bite by not letting them sort as they consume. With these NewCo rations and this NewCo goat, we can mix that goat and that 360 as we like. We can improve consumption a bit. Don't see any drawback to it, like I said, unless we get to the point where we have one of those chunky, wide, stout, earlier maturing ones, and then we can get them a little far, if you will, just in terms of body condition and chub, comparative to just staying with a pelleted feed. So there's a lot of good and some positives to feeding it. You have to pick the right ones and the right time, but the opportunities are endless in utilizing these two feeds, either individually or collectively together.
Awesome. And then just another question that came up is, what's a good ratio suggestion, or I'm guessing that's supposed to be ration suggestion, to fatten goats?
Oh, I think she's asking what's the ratio of the 360 to the
Yep.
NewCo goat, probably. You know, depending on size, depending on body condition, you could actually use the NewCo goat, and a lot of guys are using this now. Folks are using it as a sole creep feed. We consistently here mixing the 360 and the NewCo goat. We're mixing it 50-50, getting about the right amount of consumption and the right amount of flesh and chub in these to make them presentable to market, and yet utilizing it in that manner to make them where they'll go on and grow and be competitive down the road for our clients, our customers.
I think the 50-50 is a great place to start. And then if you're still not happy after feeding it for a couple of weeks, and you got to give a ruminant animal, you got to give them a couple of weeks to see a change. You're not going to see a change overnight. Keep that in mind. There's 4 of those bellies that feed's got to go through before it ever does anything. So with that being said, I would tell you start at the 50-50. And then if you're still not happy, you can always increase like the NewCo for that thing. Or if you're like, well, we got there quick, I don't want to burn this thing. I'm getting fat early. Then you go the other direction. So, but I think that's a great place to start. And then after a couple of weeks, make your adjustments as needed.
You know, and I don't know if this is a place to add it in, but we can get them heated up just a little bit. If we get these little guys excited, stimulate them a little quickly, increase their volume by adding the NewCo goat and their consumption. We can heat the belly up, get them to actually overfeed out of a creep scenario, to overeat a bit, and sometimes get their belly upset just a little bit on these tiny little guys that are pretty volatile little creatures when it comes to getting them started, getting them consuming. And once they pick it up, sometimes it doesn't take them long to pick it up a little too much where we have them in a self-feeder scenario. So I think you have to watch cautiously with that from a consumption standpoint. We love the fact that they eat, but at some point in time, they may not need as much as they're getting, and we can certainly upset their little bellies.
It goes right back to the brownie concept for me on that, because those brownies are sure good whenever you first dive into them, but after a glass of milk and too many brownies, there's none of us feel very good. So that's a great point. And then something I'll bring up to add to that, talking about ruminants and bellies and all of that. And to Glen's point there, yeah, you can get excited, and the goat's going to get excited, and he's eating this, and we're behind the 8 ball, we're trying to push on him, and he's eating more. And then the next thing, you upset that stomach. But the best way to keep from upsetting that stomach, if you are pushing on one and you're asking one to eat a lot, and they are doing that, I would tell you to feed some hay. I mean, that's one thing we haven't touched on at all, and it doesn't come in a pink bag or a pink and purple sack. But I think hay is something that's very, very good, especially whenever we're pushing on one and we're trying to get them to consume and keep them on feed and keep from burning their belly. What's your thoughts there, Glen?
100%. Yeah, we can. We don't use rabbit feed alfalfa. Hard to get here. We have nice alfalfa. Use occasionally. Some of these babies pick that up eating with their moms. Our primary hay that we use around here is a Sudan or a cane type of hay, various varieties. Some can be called hay grazer or those types of things. But we like to keep some of that hay in them, stimulate the rumen. In particularly at the formative stage where we're trying to convert an animal that God just really wanted to be a 85% browser into a market animal, into a meat animal, and a fitness athlete, if you will. These things are small, and they're very. I've used the word volatile multiple times. They're a little ticking time bomb sometimes, and we sure like to have their belly right, and there's no better way to do that than put a little hay with them, 100%.
And I'll add to that equation too. Simply said, if you add some hay to the diet, and you're a feeder that pays attention to how much is going in them a day, feeding 3 times a day or more, like Glenn says, if you get that hay amount right, that can drive intake on a skinny one and make them play the catch-up game pretty fast.
Okay.
Absolutely.
Awesome. Let me check and see. One other question that I did want to make sure we highlighted, and Rob, this kind of worked out with Rob's question that he answered, and then discussing the mixing of feeds. Is it safe to feed Monensin and Deck Ox at the same time? And so, Rob, if you want to go ahead and answer that.
Yep. I mean, I get the one-liners tonight. Not a comedian here, but I get the one-liners. FDA does not allow the mixing of Monensin and Dequinate. So you've got to make sure you can mix NewCo Goat and Advancer 360, just to make sure you have the same med in both of them. Because the other thing that's going to do for you is get your coccidiostat level high enough that you just really can control that. So the gut's healthy, you don't ever run into any cocci problems, and your animals never miss a beat.
That's a great one to consult with your veterinarian too.
Okay, perfect. Well, we'll go ahead and transition back into our slides. As we do that, there has been a couple things on fines maybe that we see in Advancer 360. So somebody want to touch on that?
Yeah, I'll take that one. We when we put these feeds together, we put them together trying to create the best pellet quality while adding the highest quality nutrition that we can. Obviously, in some situations, we're adding things that don't pellet really well. So I think that you pay attention to the pellet quality of your feed. If you have a challenge, you work with your dealer on that. But know that we're always trying to put the best pellet in a bag so that when you open that thing up, all you're seeing is big pellets with all the feed stuck together. Doesn't always happen that way, but you should, when you open a pink bag, have high standards for the quality of product that's coming out of that.
The one thing that I would add to that also there, Rob, is, that's something that, we constantly work on. Quality control is something that's at the forefront, and it's something that we try to keep an eye on. If you have a problem, then let us know. But at the same time there that we are having a piece of equipment make this feed and put it together. They don't always listen to us. We can put gas in a car, but it doesn't always get us to work every day. So there's obviously real life challenges and that come with that. And so that's something to keep in mind too, and have an open mind. If it doesn't look right, it might not be right, and let us know. But that is something there that we strive to try to stay on top of.
Perfect. And then for those of you that are asking questions on where you can find this feed, we'll definitely come back to those comments and help you each individually out. So we're not ignoring you when you ask where you can get it.
Make sure you leave your name and what your area is, your city and town, please.
The zip code is the most important deal.
Right.
Those 5 numbers.
So we discussed our new feeds, but we don't want to leave out our other ones we have in our goat lineup. And so, Cooper, Glen, Rob, if you want to just go over our entire lineup here again to summarize, and then we'll transition to supplements.
Well, I would tell you these feeds are all the ones that are offered nationally, utilize different scenarios. And we've covered the first 2 there. Fat and Sassy is a great one that, utilized across the country as a crete feed, very high energy there. And a lot of guys are utilizing that whenever they're feeding does, trying to get them chubbier all the way through. That's a product that a lot of people used before we ever had a NewCo goat. So that'll be one there that people can, intertwine and utilize those together whenever they're really trying to push on those, especially those does. And Herd Builder's another one that's utilized for a lot of breeding operations as well. It's probably the most economical one. Glenn, do you have anything to add to those two products there? I don't want to cut them short. Climatizer's not on this list as it's a very regional product. So if you're wondering why it's not on there, we haven't done away with it, but it is regional.
Well, I just had a discussion this weekend with a Midwest client about the patent sassy, and that's still a great feed, and always has been one of those higher energy games. Works extremely good. A lot of that utilized in the EBU, and still using Climatizer there. A feed that we can get them to frankly consume more of, and was designed where climate was a challenge, and hence the name. And when a lot of good animals utilize that, it probably doesn't have as many bells and whistles, obviously, as the Advancer 360 does, or the NewCos, but a great product there as well, and still utilized out east, if you will.
That will transition over to supplements.
I think we jump into the supplement side of things, and our first slide on supplements, and I'd prompt Glenn, jump in here at any point whenever you want to add anything too. But I think we'd both tell you Muscle in Motion's a great one whenever you're trying to push for that jackpot, or you've maintained one and kept them lean and late maturing, and you're trying to push for the last little bit of extra width and some condition and spread and chub, make their backs wider. That's what Muscle in Motion does. If you guys are trying to get ready for a sale, anything like that, I think this is a great product to add in there. That does a lot for width and dimension. Really gives upper condition there to their back and right behind their shoulders. Really, it pops them and opens them up there. That's one we utilize a lot early. Just trying to make sure we get them there, especially whenever we're jackpotting or we're showing fairly quick on a later maturing one or a young one.
Yeah, we like that for same reasons. Amazingly, it really hits them there, upper forerib, rack shape. I like how it says fills in the holes. It does a nice job of that. And pretty much all of them, in my opinion, can use it at some point in time. I think it is a product that we can start on, and I'm not going to tell you they need it or have to have it, or it necessarily benefits them past a certain point. It may be something you add in, pull out, and add back in again on the particular right ones. But boy, on those little skinnier green ones where we're trying to get a little more sap, a little faster, a little juice right behind their blade, I don't think there's anything like it on the market.
Yeah, I would tell you that it adds the bloom there. It probably doesn't make them as hard handling as a few of the products that we're going to talk about next. And I think that's the difference. And that's why I call it yo-yo on these products. And that's where Glenn's telling you to get on it and get off of it. I think that's a great concept. And we interchange a lot of these products together. Starshine's another one. That's kind of the next part of the feeding stage. Once you get them there, but you don't want them to get any softer, but you want to try to keep that chub and maintain what you've got and start to crispen that shape up and make them touch a little better. That's where Starshine really comes in and fits. A lot of them like it. They like to eat that. It's a very sweet product. Very, very good pellet quality there. That's a product that we've utilized a lot in just maintenance. I call it maintenance, maintaining one, kind of holding one together. There's enough calories in it to keep one fresh too. If you've got one that you've been burning on and you're trying to freshen them up, but you don't want to throw a lot of fat at them, there's not a lot of extra fat in that one, but it's certainly sweet enough to add to freshness to one and keep them fresh. Or if you're trying to hold one together, that's a great one there to lower your feed consumption and add some of that so they don't get stale on you and you don't lose them to maturity.
I think as we transition into exercise with some of these, when it gets kind of the timing's right, it's a good way to help keep them consuming. Also a good way to mitigate some of the stress that we see as we start an exercise program one that's maybe getting at that point where maturity in feeding has allowed us to go ahead and get to moving either on a treadmill or by running with a track dog.
I think another place where I didn't mention before too is if you're trying to get one to grow, but you don't want to throw a high protein at them and you don't really want to throw muscle and motion at them, that's a nice little boost there to try to make them hit a gear and get a little more growth out of them. The last one on this list here is Sculpt, and it's the ultimate fat burner. I mean, we look up and we've been focused on. A lot of people will tell you they've done it. You get focused on basketball season, they get basketball season done with, they haven't probably exercised quite enough, and they're like, oh man, we're fat. What do? We've got them too soft. We don't have enough shape. This is your best friend. You don't have to feed them much feed. You can feed them some Sculpt, really burn them down, shape them up. It hardens them up. It works pretty quick. It works about as quick as anything in the marketplace on this one. The biggest difference of its contemporaries on the marketplace to me, you can burn fat without burning muscle. We hydrate the muscle with this product, but we don't try to sit there and burn all those fat cells out by dehydrating them, and then you lose your muscle. And I would tell you this one stands alone in the marketplace of keeping your muscle while burning fat, whether that be through their chest floor or over their ribs. You go to a show and a judge tells you one's too soft or not shapely enough, not hard enough. If you're not feeding this product here, you're probably missing out on trying to help yourself, in my opinion.
Yeah, this is not, I 100% agree with Coop. This is not the regular protein additive that you see across multiple feed companies and species. This is a full-on game changer, allows us to shape and touch and tone, and we never burn out the edge of the loin. We never burn them down to where we don't have the creases or the volume that we saw ahead of time. So love the product in the right spot and the right time. Nothing like it for sure.
Every one of them doesn't need it, though. I would say that there's the ones that are chubby, that are soft, they need it. The ones that aren't, they don't need to be on that product. RITE Factor multi-species, that's the one option. The other option is the RITE Factor goat. I'm gonna let Glen talk this one because he's fed this one for as long as I am old.
I probably have fed more of it than anybody. People know that our family feeds uses and feeds it to every species that we have. First thing I'd say is multi-species or goats all safe to use. Doesn't get you in a jam if you happen to run out of multi-species on something and you have some RITE Factor goat over there in the barn. You can utilize that as well. It singles out muscle shape, and for me and for what we see, it's a way to shape one in when you really don't need to burn. When you're not really interested in tightening them down in terms of cage fat or rib fat, or you really don't want to get too far ahead and maybe go beyond the point of freshness, but you want to crease. And there's no question we can get more crease and more freshness back, I'd say last rib back in the edge of their loin with this product, and still keep the creases in the shape that we have as you read them from their hip down in their outer leg. Great product. I've long said unless they're sure enough poor or skinny, all of them can use this, in my opinion, 30 to 45 days out of target. We have fed some and have clients that do feed it literally day one on, and rate the volume according to the size of the goat, and have had incredible success. Some of the winningest families that we have and that we help in this industry are on it to that degree. Can't say enough good things about it. The RITE Factor is always a game changer when we get ready to go show.
So one of the questions that I get in the goat industry, and we're going to jump straight into it head first right here, is what's the difference of RITE Factor and RITE Time, and which one do I utilize? When do I utilize them? I'm going to go first on this one. I'm going to have Glen follow me up here just in a comparison note, and he made mention of it. But whenever you're trying to get some shape and you're trying to square that loin up or smoothen that loin up or help your loin edge there, and that's, you know, right above your hook bones, your pin bones there, whenever you're studying on the back side of their back and you're trying to make that bigger or fuller, that is a great time. And that is whenever you should be utilizing RITE Factor if you're trying to help shape them up. And they mean, you know, that's one of their main problems. They need help there. That is when, to me, you use RITE Factor. If you're trying to shape one of those up that's got maybe a shot more chub on them, they've got a huge loin in them, it's smooth, but they need to be harder. They need more shape behind their shoulder. That is whenever we utilize RITE Time on the goats. And those two products there, I think you can utilize them, you know, one or the other. There's a few guys that feed both of them in smaller amounts, which is fine if you know what you're doing there. But RITE Time is a very high protein product that you can burn on that loin if you're too thin and too skinny. You can kind of dry them down there, and that's where RITE Factor doesn't do that. Glenn, what's your thoughts?
Perfect. 100% agree. RITE Time is the mega shaper burner, and it works awesome when you've got the right amount of chub and on the right genetic package. I'd say I utilize that probably a bit more sparingly than some, because I can see significant differences day to day over a 3 to 5 day 7 day time frame with RITE Time. I just want to make sure that when we go to that, we have the right animal, we've got the right feeder looking, or the right person looking at them, and we just want to make sure that we're using it to get where we need to be, and we don't want to get any too far. And that's what I would say on the goats, because of their metabolism. They'll get crisper faster, maybe particularly than a lamb will.
Right. And the last thing that I would add to that is, you know, that's a product there that we have at a feeding rate of like, I think it's 2 ounces per day is the max. There's a lot of us in the goat world on this product. We're utilizing, you know, 1 ounce per goat per day. I mean, doesn't take much. A little bit goes a long way. So that's a product there that, you know, if you really need to shape one up and their loins are really good and square and smooth, but they're just too chubby, too soft, that one there could be your best friend. Yep. Don't go too far, I think, would be the message that Glenn would tell you, because you can burn one with that. And I do not encourage using that as a fat burner. I mean, even though it will burn some fat, that's what we've got Sculpt for. This one here is strictly built to try to shape them up and rip them up there at the end. And there's things in RITE Factor and RITE Time, as in the end, a lot of you will probably understand this, but we don't feed a lot of feed there at the end if we're trying to get their bellies right and their shape right, and everything just to look the part in the show ring. There are acidifiers in both of those products to help with urinary calculi, kidney stones. So we've got additional things in there. We're talking a lot on shape and muscle, but there are things in there that try to compensate whenever we lower feed there at the end to try to get that show ring look, as well as, you know, enhance their hide and their skin and their touch. If you got one that's thick hided, or maybe you got fungus early in life and it's, you know, skin's not very good, RITE Time can help kind of tighten and thin that hide just a little bit there too. It's an additional note. Basic science, the last one here. Glenn, why don't you cover that one as well?
Well, that's a goat specific product that we have. It can certainly help them to get ready faster. It definitely has a component that can cause them to become more shapely, to just harden and give you a little more touch and tone. It's kind of once again, to me, goat specific. I think you could feed some the most. You have to watch your P's and Q's in terms of how much condition you have and where you want to be as to how much you're burning at the rate that you're feeding. So once again, another good product, and one that is goat specific, but can certainly help you get there a little faster when you need that.
The last thing I'll say before we leave this page here, Advancer 360 carries the RITE Factor technologies in it, and NewCo carries the RITE Time technologies in it. And these are addition to, so these are just the extras, if you will, to try to get more out of them. But both of those products are actually in our base feeds too. that's something that I know a lot of you've probably heard that over the years. And if you do not want to go buy a supplement, you don't have to go buy a supplement. If you're trying to get your project, this is whenever you want to make a change to your project. So we have designed base feeds that can make high quality, show goats, show lambs, just by feeding the base feed. You just change the amounts and volume that you feed to change your condition in that standpoint. These supplements are certainly here to be utilized to try to, change the color of that ribbon to the brighter colors towards the front. Fat and energy supplements here. Stamina is a liquid fat. It's a fortified wheat germ oil, kind of a rice bran oil mixture. It's a light fat source. We like that because it doesn't burn their bellies as bad. I'm going to tell you, I'll be the first one to admit, I use a lot more stamina in the winter than I do in the summertime, because it's certainly the heat with an oil-based fat can get a little hotter on their belly, hotter on their hair. So we utilize this a lot in the winter. A lot of those things we've taken to Denver have been on stamina. A lot of them that we're showing here in the summertime, we try to stay away from any fats in the summer because it just hurts your consumption as much as anything. But that's where fat and fluffy, if you're trying to get one, fat here in the summer months, or if you get behind the 8 ball and want to try to make a fat, that's where you can add in some fat and fluffy there and get you a smoother finish, and just smoothing those things up just a little bit before you get there, and try to drench them at the end to smooth them up if you know that you're behind just a little bit.
100%. Got to watch your bellies when it's warm and times of transition. Too much oil is not going to be your buddy this time of year.
Stretch is a great one whenever we're trying to get, belly and body. Obviously at the shows, we carry this one with us whenever we're trying to get some underlying quality or more rib expansion out of them that we're not getting with swell, which we haven't covered it yet. But whenever we're trying to get a little extra, this is also one that you can, if you're fighting weight, you got to weigh back, but you need belly, but you don't have enough time. When it says it expands 3 times its size, that is no kidding. We've done it. We've set out a cup on a table, filled it with water, and then watched it expand 3 times its size. Well, that's what it's doing in their belly as well. And that's what people like. I don't understand why you feed so much of it at the show. But whenever we're fighting a way back and we've pulled enough weight off one, and Glen can attest to how much weight I can pull off a sheep whenever his daughter's showing it. But this is where we use stretch to try to get those bellies as big as we can without feeding them a lot of extra. So that's something to keep in mind there. We utilize this a lot at the house. I utilize this on skinny ones too, to expand that belly. Maybe they don't eat enough to get that belly big enough to really consume a lot. But after you give them stretch and you get that belly stretched out and big, then you pull the stretch out, replace it with feed, and all of a sudden now you're getting more valuable nutrients in them and they're eating more. That's a few ways we use it. Glen, what's your thoughts? How do you utilize this?
You told me that several years ago on feeding some of those that are a little tighter centered early on. And, I was always the guy that wanted to get as much feed in them as I could. The reality is can't get enough volume in them just feeding feed a lot of the time. And we went to using that stretch, as you suggested to me, early on some of those that are a little tighter centered that need to be opened up. And then after we get them to consuming that, which the bulk of ours eat it extremely well, then we can go back with feed, and amazingly they'll improve their consumption a significant amount, and you get there significantly faster than if you'd have done it the old-fashioned way. So it's a tip that you gave me that we've utilized, and there's no doubt I just walk away when you're writing those cards down, because I can't make them look that and weigh that the way you can using stretch there at those shows. And awesome way to keep their underlying in them. Great way to manage and mitigate a weight issue as well.
RITE Flex. This is obviously one of the newer supplements that we've made there at Show-Rite. This one here is very beneficial whenever you've got one potentially that gets a little bit tighter. When we start talking about structure, tightness, that could be in their top line. It's usually, if you see it in their top line, it's usually come from a structural, and maybe they're too straight, they're too tight up front, they're too tight behind. That's probably what's mitigated the issue that we're looking at. And, how do we do that? What do we do to support that? I would tell you, I would encourage you, don't wait till you have a problem and trying to fix it with a supplement with a problem. I would say if you think that your animal's built just a little bit tight or a little bit straight, go ahead and put them on it to try to navigate having a major issue later. Because don't forget, we're trying to make, little bodybuilders here, if you will. So their muscles just get bigger with age and time. And with that being said, they're going to get tighter and more restricted in their movement. Obviously, genetics are going to vary in which ones are going to get tighter. But as genetics have changed over time, we get these things bigger, stouter, wilder muscle. We see more and more structural issues, and that's why we saw the fit to come out with a joint supplement here. And I think it's one that's very, very good. Actually, I would encourage Rob to jump in here and just discuss a little bit of, the support that we're utilizing here, in addition to maybe our feeds or whatnot. What's different and why we're adding this too.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of questions that are popping up right now that are discussing about how these supplements can or can't be mixed. And I think those are all good questions. And I think what you have to do is just read the function and purpose and stay to the prescribed amounts that these goats are supposed to be getting. And we find that every critter's different. They've all got different shapes, different positive attributes, different attributes we're trying to correct and match the supplement to the issue that you're trying to enhance. But I think that's where when we put a lot of these supplements in our base feeds, that's where we can really have a strong base feed to get everybody on a very, very good plateau, and then just tweak them with our supplements. So we keep the feeding philosophy a little bit more like KISS, keep it simple. And I think that philosophy works for everyone. Hopefully I answered your question. If I didn't, we'll try her again.
I'm a fan. I'm a fan here. 8 out of 10, 9 out of 10 animals that we deal with are not technically sound or mobile enough, in my opinion. And we have genetically wound them to create the exceptionalism that we want to see with the brighter colored ribbons or the bigger banners at the front in these show rings. And in doing so, we push the limits of skeletal quality and build. And I'm just going to tell you, Cooper said it best, don't wait till you have an issue, because I'm just going to tell you 8 or 10 of them will have 8 out of 10 of them will probably have some issue if you wait that long. What we're doing to them is not exactly designed to be the weed eaters or the browsers that they are in nature. And this is an awesome product to promote flexibility and general health joints. And I don't know how old you are, but the older you get, I promise you, the more you'll want to be more flexible than you are. And this is a good way to mitigate that.
One thing before we transition from RITE Flex, I don't know, Cooper or Rob or Glenn, if you want to touch on like the feeding directions of RITE Flex. I know, when we feed the pigs, we always like to do that loading phase. And so maybe if you guys want to talk about that and how that kind of works.
So actually, we'll do a loading phase on some of them if we think that we're in a little bit of a bind. But that's the only time I utilize a loading phase, or if I'm going to a show and can see the drench starting to hit them and they start to get tighter, then we'll double up on our RITE Flex. But a lot of times we're just feeding an ounce per feeding. And that, I guess I feed a lot of our supplements on the morning and the evenings, even if we're feeding 3 times a day. Usually my third feeding is just feed. But we're doing an ounce morning and night on our RITE Flex. And if we notice there, whenever we start to really pour it to one that they're getting tight, then we'll do a loading phase there for potentially 5 days and double it up and then come back down. And then we may double it up again. throughout the show season if we think we have one of those that's causing us some issues, just to change it, from a metabolism phase, I think, as much as anything. Show day supplements. I think this is something that, the entire country's seen swell buckets in every species, every barn across the country. And a lot of them, still get a lot of questions on our daily emails. How do we utilize swell? How do we drench it? I see people putting orange juice with it. I see people putting dine with it. I see people, mixing it. How much are we mixing? I've heard different ways to mix it. I would tell you that we start mixing it. There's the mixing labels on the bucket there. But as we've talked about some change in genetics, these things are bigger rib, they're bigger body than what they were whenever we came out with this product, 3 years ago or whatever it was now, maybe even longer than that, probably 4. But I would tell you with a lot of them, we'll start it at about half the feeding rate that's on the bucket, and then we'll increase or decrease as needed. But that a lot depends on how big ribbed, how big bodied they are. And the more body you need, the higher concentrated you make it to get that expansion and that rib and that body. If you have a big bellied, big bodied one, then you cut it in half, or you could cut it even less. And then it's the amounts that you give it throughout the day. And if you'll cut your feeding rate down and then you give more often and more feeding periods throughout the day, if you're at the show or you're drenching or whatever the case may be, then, that's how you get it in them without trying to get a gassy belly. And the goats are the most finicky animals on the planet because the feeding rate for the sheep have stayed very similar. But the goats are the ones that, to me, are becoming very finicky. Over the years, we've cut it down, and then we actually give it more times throughout the day, if that makes sense. Glenn, what's your thoughts here?
Oh, exactly that. We'll cut that rate significantly. Systematically, the goat is the only species that technically we collectively, let me say, as a group of judges, we almost prefer them to be a little tighter centered and flanked, maybe not as productive in their underline as a market calf or a heifer or a lamb for sure, or a hog. The same judges that like them this way in other species want them a little tighter centered maybe. And I think, when we use swell, we cut it down significantly comparative to a lamb. We utilize it in our selectively and in our drench at a little bit of a lighter rate so that we don't get maybe too much upper swell, shove, body, center, and then kind of make them a little more awkward in terms of how they move or how they present themselves, particularly in profile. I think we probably just run a little bit lighter dose of it comparative to what we do on the sheep side. But great product. As you said, there's no show box that's winning that doesn't have it, period. So.
I think a product that we round out the supplements with here is Exhale. And, that's one that we can utilize it at home. You can utilize it at the show. To me, it's one that you should have a half a dozen of them laying around if you've got very many animals, because there's days when you can utilize it at home. If they get a little cough, they get a hack, anything like that, you can try to get that knocked out of them as quick as you can before it sets in and becomes a degree of pneumonia or anything like that. And it's one that if you're exercising one or home or your kids are working with them, then you can utilize that to try to get them to last just a little longer. And at the shows, I've probably every heavyweight that I've ever showed and then turned around and showed them for the champion heavyweight and had to turn around and go to a grand drive. In that scenario, I've always got that in my pocket when we're at the ring, and I might toss it to the kid and shove a half a tube at them real quick, because all that does is open those things up. And whenever they get hot and they want to start quitting, that's the biggest thing that we can do. And I don't know that it does as much for bracing, but I would tell you, and Glenn and I could contest, a lot of these judges' minds are made up on the move. And whenever you hit them with a little bit of that Exhale, they kind of throw their head up and they catch them a gear. And I think that keeps them from looking sluggish probably as much as anything. And that's where we utilize that product a lot.
One of the most underused products in the industry. I would say Cooper and I are the largest end users of Exhale. We use it at home before we exercise. It doesn't matter what species. We use it on at any point in time when they're a little bit challenged in terms of their breathing. Maybe have had a vet visit. Recommend it for those times, and there is absolutely no question that is a performance enhancer to help those animals move better, feel better, catch a gear, look better, more presentable show day. I love it. Keep it in the house and use it on myself when I need to open my airways and breathe a bit better.
Okay, we're going to transition just another quick question period because I know we had some supplement questions, and so we'll go ahead and get those answered. The first one I was actually asked back during the feed talk, and it kind of has to do a little bit with the feed and supplements. So when do you recommend to add muscle and motion in the feed program with the new feeds that we've got?
Well, I recommend if needed, if we need some pudge behind their shoulder, in their forerib, if you want more chub in terms of upper shape of their rack behind their blade, at whatever point in time that is, you can start. I'll tell you on ours, we're not going to start that probably prior to weaning. I know some folks that do and use it to help them sell chubbier babies. We probably get ours weaned and then start them on a little bit of muscle and motion at that point in time when we need to just open them up and add some chub, particularly in forerib and upper rib cage and rack shape.
Awesome. The next question we've got here, does Advancer 360 have RITE factor in it?
Yes, in the same amount that was in Advancer Plus.
Perfect. Rob, I know you kind of touched on this, but are there supplements that should not be mixed together?
I always shake my head whenever we talk to somebody and they've got them on muscle and motion and sculpt. I mean, that's two products that are absolutely combating themselves. You're wasting your money. I think the biggest thing is on supplements. If you're going to utilize a supplement, you need to know what they do and what they're trying to do. And that's why we do things like this. We've got other stock show classrooms that are on our website. And I think if you're going to utilize a supplement, you need to know what you're expecting of that supplement and why you're using it. Because there's a lot of instances where I've seen customers utilizing supplements that they would have been better off just feeding the feed because they didn't understand what the supplement was supposed to be doing. So I think that's the biggest thing is, I'm not going to sit here and tell you that there's not some that they can't all kind of be used and intertwined together, but there's instances where they absolutely are just hurting yourself because I don't ever feed muscle and motion and sculpt at the same time. That's why we have Starshine. It sits right in the middle. That's the one that we utilize in that instance. Now, I might use a little bit of Starshine and sculpt together on one, but those are two phases that are coinciding, and I'm maybe in that transition. I'm not quite fat enough to harden them up yet on sculpt, but I want to start to harden them up. And then there's phases like that where we can do it. But I would tell you the biggest thing is understanding what supplements you're using.
100% agree.
I know we kind of covered this, but maybe Randy missed it. Does Show-Rite have a show day feed to put fill on for goats?
The fill for goats is stretch. We talked about it, offering more rib and body, and then swell would be the liquid version to try to get rib and body.
What is the best time frame before exercise on Exhale?
When we pull them out of the pen to exercise, when we catch them, we go ahead and give them Exhale. And so they're that transition period from there to a treadmill or to a track would probably be in the 60 to 90-second range is when we do that. So right when we pull them out, it's not something we hit them with and wait 5 or 10 minutes. Not that you couldn't do that. If we're in the hog barn and we're going to drive 3 hogs, we might go down and give it to those 3 pigs at the same time and then take one out and drive them. And so obviously the third one's had it in their system a little longer, but it works almost immediately to open them up, to help them breathe, help with oxygenation in the blood to a higher degree while you're exercising.
Another way to utilize that, if you've got one that starts coughing after exercise, or maybe they've got a little damage in there, whenever they start that coughing, we'll give them some, and then it seems like they kind of draw it down there deeper, and it helps knock that cough out too. We might give it before exercise and after on some of those that we're trying to get rid of a cough or something like that.
To add to that, I have never seen an issue with using that as many times as you feel necessary in a given time period. I just don't think you can't really have too much of that, in my opinion, at any point in time. I guess maybe if they were jumping the fence time you got done, that might be a little much for your little girl, but that's an awful good product that we use a lot in our feeding game.
Perfect. Okay, another question. What is the best supplement to feed wethers to build muscle for a few months before the show?
Glenn, you want to cover that one?
Repeat that for me.
Best supplement to feed to your wethers to build muscle a few months before the show.
I'm gonna tell you, I would use depending on the goat. I'm gonna suggest that maybe what you want to do, if you're not doing it, is incorporate the NewCo goat into your feed, because realistically 60 to 90 days out, if you're not chubby or chunky enough, muscle is red. The fat that you put on them or condition you put on them at that time is actually red into muscle shape. And so I would say make sure that you're on that. If you're really needing to work on their forerib, upper forerib, rack shape at that point in time, and they're not too chubby, the muscle in motion is a great way to do that. Almost every goat that we feed, knowing how we want them to look 30 to 45 days out, we'll RITE factor those goats. There's various ways to feed that. Some people feed the 3 ounces 1 time a day. It spikes their metabolism, and on one that's a little chubby, I think that's not a bad game plan. We break ours up, that 3 ounce feeding up of RITE factoring as many times as we feed a day. So in our barn, we'd be feeding 1 ounce 3 times a day. And I think we get a more leveled, we don't get this bump in metabolism, this increased metabolism that some people see when they feed it all at once. Those are the things that I would say would improve muscle shape. We get a little carried away thinking that we can exercise a skinny one. And I think we're going to talk about exercise here in a minute particularly, but exercising skinny goats to build muscle is an issue that we have industry-wide. You need to feed those goats to exhibit the muscle mass that they need, and then we need to shape them either using sculpt or using RITE factor or combinations of that. In some more extreme cases, RITE time to get the shape that we want.
Okay, a couple more questions and then we'll transition on. One simple one, is it best to use swell in a drench?
We utilize it in a drench whenever we can drench. There's a lot of county fairs and different state fairs that don't allow drenching. And so we try to, train those to eat just a little bit of that on their feed. That's not something you do overnight. It takes a little bit of time there. But if you have to get them to eat a little bit of wet feed or put it on there, that's the best case scenario. But in a situation where you can drench, I would drench it so you know exactly how much they're getting.
And then How far out from the show do you recommend using a product like Starshine?
That's dependent on the animal, I would say, because there's certain ones that are on it for 60 days and they're on it all the way up till we show them. And there's some that, we yo-yo that product out, maybe with Sculpt, and then we come back to it to try to make sure they're as fresh as we can. So that's one that it's totally dependent on the animal, I would say. But it's one that if they're in the right kind of condition and you want to make sure that you're as maxed out as you can, then that's a great one to have on them.
Last one, Glenn, you kind of touched on this here for a second on the exercise side, but somebody here's new to showing lambs and just their third time on goats. So when you're doing exercise, do you feed and then exercise, or do you exercise and then feed?
No, we like to exercise at a time when we're not actually right with our feeding. What I would recommend is you don't necessarily correlate those two in the same session or time frame. Obviously, if you exercise and immediately feed them, you're going to have the decreased consumption. Also, if you feed them and then immediately exercise them, I challenge you how that makes you feel as well. So we try to find an opportune time where your environment allows you and your time and your personal schedule allows you to exercise. Sometimes here it would be very early morning. Sometimes it might be mid-afternoon if the AC is running in the barn and we're treadmilling. It could be that we feed at 7:30, 8 in the evening on a summertime evening where it could be as hot as 100 degrees at that point in time. We feed that late, and then sometimes exercise them late night. So I think that really varies depending on your schedule, but I wouldn't make the exercise and the feed coincide within the same 30-minute time frame, I'd say.
Okay. So we'll go ahead and transition on to the next topic, and it's really going to be just the basics. And so pass it back to Glenn and Coop and Rob, and we'll start off with everything here.
Glenn, I'll let you go ahead and just cover this.
Yeah, there's various trains of thought about bedding. If you get them on shavings and get them used to it in some format, some type of shaving, that can be beneficial. You'll have to watch when you put fresh shavings in or change shavings, depending on air freshness or air quality. Sometimes they'll consuming them at that point in time. You probably need to either flavor them with something that they won't consume. You could use vinegar or something like that, or you'll need to muzzle those animals to mitigate the shavings ingestion problem. It says here nothing at all. A lot of our clients, they don't have necessarily awesome barns, but they're very, very functional. And those animals are on a white type limestone rock or road base that we have in this part of the world. Maybe caliche used, and that is awesome for those goats as well to be on that. I think if you're trying to just talk about facility and where you want to be, what we have to have is a very functional facility. The comfort level needs to be good. They don't need to be too cold, don't need to be too hot. I think when we're talking about goats in particular, we need to be cautious and remember that they like some breeze. They maybe don't like as much direct wind or air on them as maybe market lambs would or show lambs will. We have to be make sure that we have the right kind of facility in a pen where maybe they don't have the ability to do a lot of free grazing when they're turned out or when they're in their pen. That's going to greatly decrease the amount of feed that they consume and will certainly make them not look the way you want them to. no athlete gets to eat whatever they want other than a sumo wrestler, and they're not going to win a fitness contest. So we need to be able to control what their consumption is according to the facility that you have. Talking about the basics, I'll take this one. Good feed eliminates lots of issues. Consistent feeding, consistency with your time, actually involving yourself with your project in terms of looking at them, studying them, knowing their demeanor, knowing what they do, how they act, how they come to feed, etc., will certainly help you be able to make feed adjustments according to how they consume them. From a cover or finish standpoint, we want to get enough on them at that point in time early on. We don't want to starve them into being big and rangy. We like to feed more feed early. Obviously, as a person matures, we need to manage our intake and our exercise accordingly. And I've got some friends from high school that look just about like they did when we graduated, and that's because they managed their intake and manage their consumption and their exercise. Muscle development, as I said earlier, fat is perceived as muscle in young livestock, particularly in these goats. And skinny goats that you think maybe you go to a jackpot with a skinny one, you place 8th and you think your goat's bad and you don't have a chance. And the reality is you've been kind of starving on them a little bit because you wanted them to be a 83 pounder at some point in time, and God designed them to weigh 103. And really the reality is you have to feed them to their genetic potential at the size and maturity that we want them. No doubt about it. The most basic thing that we have to do is keep them hydrated. We've got to keep clean water buckets. I suggest you use buckets and not automatic waters. That way, you parents, as you manage your children and their projects, you can manage their ability to clean buckets, to freshen buckets up, to dump them and refill them multiple times a day. Make sure you keep those buckets at an opportune place where they can consume. You don't want them out in the sun. You don't want them where they can freeze in the winter, etc. So those are kind of basics that we see in feeding these market goats.
I think this is a slide that's very dependent on where you're at. I know there's a lot of county fairs and shows that, they have weight limits and minimums. And I'll be honest with you, I don't understand a lot of that because I think all of these things are just a little different. I'm going to tell you that just as Glen made a comment there before, you need to feed these things to their genetic potential. They all have different sizes. We've never told a kid they're too tall or they're too short or they're too heavy or too light and they can't come to school. I mean, that's the same concept I have. As long as they want to, I guess my thought would be as long as they're under a year old and they've got their baby teeth, then let's go show them. So if you want to have some kind of regulatory on that, but as far as weighing them, I think it's very important. If your show, your endpoint has restrictions, I think that's something to make sure you monitor. Other than that, I think you got to make sure that your goat looks good and they're coming along the way that they're supposed to. Glenn's smiling because I'm betting that he doesn't weigh his every week, and I can tell you I don't. But I do have feeders that are actually at county fairs today that were weighing in, and they can't weigh over a certain, and they can't weigh under a certain weight. And so it is out there, and it's something that you need to know what show you're going to and what you got to be in for, and make sure you got the right age animal is probably the most important thing on those scenarios. But we feed every day to the animal that we're feeding.
Well, my chuckles actually for some of our really, really competitive feeders and awesome friends and clients. And had one a year ago that, I asked him, what's that thing weighing? And they never got him weighed. And some point in time, we put him on the scale, and I think he weighed 131, and we got a 20 max rolling in Texas. So, yeah, it is important that you have a plan. And, I think feeding and trying to maximize potential by watching your scale is a bad plan. God made some of us to be heavyweights, and some of us to be middles, and some of us to be lights. Some are super heavies, actually. But, we really we feed them to the end point they look the best. But it is good to know where you're at so you can keep up, so you don't get the wide-eyed moment where you're instead of gaining 6.5 or 7 pounds this month, that thing gains 14, and all of a sudden you're up against maybe some hard break, as Cooper said. Maybe somebody's at a county show today. So good plan to be able to do that, to be able to get them weighed.
I think this is a slide here that a lot of us probably overlook, the importance of just our daily routine. And I would tell you, I think Glen would also say that, you want to talk to your vet. You want to have a plan to keep these things as healthy as possible. I know we worm ours every month. We're working on exterior parasites. You may get a load of shavings in that had something in them. It seems anymore it's harder and harder to get good clean shavings. So you never know whenever you're bringing in external parasites or internal parasites for that matter. So it's really important, I think, to make sure you keep these things clean month to month, and make sure we rotate ours, maybe use a clear one month and a white one month, just to try to cover as many bases as we can. But consult with your veterinarian, get you a game plan. There's other things out there like Corid, Sulfa. There's different things out there that guys utilize in a monthly scenario, and where you're at. Some of you know that you're a lot more prone, and some of you are in a lot cleaner environment. So that's something there that be as aggressive as you need to be for your scenario. A lot of us have them at school farms where there's all species there. I would tell you, you're probably gonna have to be a little more aggressive than you are if you're at your own show barn and you keep it clean and all that. So, I don't know, Glen, what's your thoughts there on some basic?
Well, very, very similar to y'all. We probably worm a little more often here. We treat coccidia for sure about every 45 days. I think the key to this is the last part of that slide. The program needs to really, you need to engage your veterinarian with that, and they can help you. I tell a lot of young people and parents at my camps and clinics that, if you do a nice job of keeping the parasites out of your goats and off of your goats, that typically you defeated about 95% of your competition. And maybe it's 90%, but it's still a significant amount. Something that a lot of people miss when it comes to parasite control, particularly on goats, is the lice factor. And it's as bad as having internals for sure. And so we treat for that. We try to break a life cycle twice in a month, and then we can go to a monthly basis on that as well. So good stuff there. I love the engagement of a quality veterinarian there in your program.
The one thing that I would add to that, lastly, is the more efficient, the cleaner your animal is, the more efficient they're going to be, the more efficient your feeding program will be. A lot of us, at times have called before, maybe they're not gaining, they're not doing what they're supposed to be. And that's the first thing that Glen and I would ask you is, what's your worming routine? What's your, have you checked your stool or anything like that? So if you don't think something's being efficient, if you don't understand why your feed's not working, this is a great slide to look back at and make sure that you've covered your, crossed your T's and dotted your I's here. slide here that pretty much breaks down. Glenn and I went through this earlier with Bailey here and just made a list of things that we would recommend that you do. We don't have to go through here and read them. This will be available to go back to, but just some simple steps here and things that we recommend you do to try to get your goat to be broke. I know we've been going here for an hour and a half, so I don't want to sit here and read through this. If there's ever any questions on this, shoot it in the chat and we'll try to get your questions answered too. If it's not covered on this slide.
Don't leave them chained up or haltered up and go to the house. It's just common practice that you stay with them. If you're going to chain them up, be breaking on them or haltering on them, etc. You don't need to leave them unattended.
Kind of like leaving them on a treadmill unattended. Wouldn't recommend that.
No.
Similar scenario here, teaching your goat to brace. I think it's something you got to have patience. And I would tell you anything bracing, training, these animals are not, they're not the biggest brain ones in the world, but they are creatures of habit. And I think whether that be a good or a bad habit, if you'll make it a good habit every day and do the same thing the right way every day, especially whenever you're breaking them, it may be just for 5 to 10 minutes because we got, something going on and got a game to catch or whatnot. But I think it's really important to remind them every day, just for a few minutes, what we're supposed to be doing, what we're working on, and then try to really, repetition. They break to that really good. If you try to go out there and work with them once a week and say, well, I got 12 weeks, I got 12 days to work with them, you're never going to get them broke the way that you want them to break them. And remember, whenever you go in there in the end, they're only going to act as good as they are broke, and that's the hours that you've put into it. So that would be my added addition to, bracing and trying to break any of these animals.
When we started, I'll add in there, I agree 100%. When we started on this goat deal, I had a very good friend tell me, you need to go 5 to 7 days in a row when you start this training, breaking process. And she told me, she said, if you go 4 days and you skip a day, when you start back over, you need to count that as day one. And until you go 5 to 7, you haven't given them enough opportunity to retain what you need them to retain. And I can vouch for that. It's something that we lived with. We fed them for 21 years successfully. And when we got on them and it was time to get them broke, we stayed hitched a minimum of 5 and more like 7 days in a row. And then they don't come, typically don't come unbroken beyond that. You can skip a few days and go back out, and they've retained quite a bit of what you taught them.
I think exercise here, this is a great slide here there's every kind of scenario out there from, sprinting, treadmills, tracks, and it all depends. Yeah, if you can have every tool in the arsenal, that's great. I would encourage it. I encourage having a treadmill, encourage having a walker, I encourage having a track. You may say, hey, I don't have any of that. I don't have the capabilities to get it. So how am I supposed to get there? And that's just, basis of take them down the driveway, run them back. If you got a short driveway, but that's all you've got, you better take them down there and back a few times. Utilize what you've got in your resources. And that's going to be life, and figure out how to make it work. And that's essentially what we're doing here. We track, we treadmill here, run them forward on a treadmill. Some of them run forward on a treadmill better than they run on a track. They sit there and let the dog chew on them if you give them the opportunity. So, we utilize both of those tools and a walker. We recommend, treadmilling them backwards every other day. And then, depending upon condition, how long we're doing it. And depending on condition, how long we're tracking, how often we're tracking. Glenn, you take it from there.
Yeah, every other day, or for sure twice a week, once we get enough condition on them, is a solid exercise plan. 3 days a week, once they sure enough are chubbed and we're working them, I think that's a real solid and can be kind of a blanket you could throw over most of the goats that we feed and we deal with. Sprinting, creates more muscle stress and creates more healing, creates more bulk and shape. The amount of muscle in terms of myofibrils that they're born with is all they really have when you're done. But you can shape them once you get them chubby by doing this. Reward-based exercise, which Cooper talked about. Hey, that's a good way to do it, and we've helped kids be successful. Or track, I would say that's extreme cases. They work extremely hard at it. They're very good feeders, and they sought the best help. But everything's possible, and we can make them look how we need them to look. I would say the significant thing that I see go on nationwide is people thinking that exercising their skinny goat is going to create this big muscle look, and that's never the case. I tell them, if you take a young immature child that's very, very thin and you run them for 8 or 10 minutes, they only get thinner. They never get bulkier. So we need to work more on the feeding game and less on the exercise game if we want them to be shapely and bulky from a muscularity standpoint.
I think we just covered that. The one thing that I always kind of break it down to is we're trying to make them look like bodybuilders, if you will. It really doesn't matter how much they can lift or how far they can pull the wagon. They just got to look like they can pull the wagon. And I think that at the end of the day, that's why we're doing it in sprints. That's why we're doing it in small, quick intervals. That's the basis to exercise, and essentially what we just covered there. But it's one of the reasons why we do that.
Well, yeah, Cooper and I've done quite a few of these together. Marathon runners, marathon runners aren't bulky, and they don't win a contest where muscle shape and volume is of importance. Sprinters more and more are the bulkier athletes, and they're not built around distance running. They're built around short, high energy bursts of exercise, and so that's what we're working on when we want to exercise these goats.
Well, guys, thank you. We've kind of reached the end, and we'll hit on some more questions here just before we conclude everything. We'll go ahead. There was a few more supplement questions as we kind of started the basics of daily care and all these other things. So maybe we'll get some of those out of the way. When do you need to use swell?
We started about 72 hours before we go to the show, but some of that depends on if you've got a skinnier one, you may want to start it further out than that and start to creep it into them and get it into their system, because it will help you smoothen up one of those skinny ones that you're trying to make smoother. But if you got them in that kind of the right kind of condition, the best thing to do is utilize it whenever you go to a show, because it keeps them fresh. I think at the end of the day, the biggest reason why you're using swell is to keep them fresh, keep them hydrated. And that's essentially what it does. And it helps with the stress factor as well, with the extra biomasses and things in there. And one thing I'll throw out there on swell is if you've got one and you're using a light dose of it and they start to scour on you, it's 99% of the time, it's not the swell, it's the stress. It's because they had some coxy in them that broke whenever they got to the show, something of that nature. Swell actually, with the biomasses and different technologies in it, it actually helps aid in the stress period, keep them fresh, keep them hydrated while they're doing that. So that's just something that a lot of people may tell you to quit if you get one scoured or get one loose at the show. I'm the opposite of that on the swell. It actually helps hold them together.
100% opposite. Yeah, we're going the other direction with it, and we typically start about 48 hours out on our swell and our drench. Have gone a little longer on some, and certainly on some have gone a shorter time frame, but around that 2-day mark for what we do is about where we're at.
Perfect. Next question. I believe this was kind of asked during the supplement time, but are any of these good to use on pregnant / lactating does to help with growth of the kids? maybe that was over the feed as well and I missed it. I'm not sure.
I saw that one earlier, Bailey, and I think that was a feed-related question. And yes, those can be used. Certainly, the calories and the extra protein in those are going to help with fetal development.
Next question: is it all right if goats are on dirt, or is it better keeping them locked in a pen?
Well, I would say manage where it fits from a health standpoint, first of all, and a consumption standpoint, second of all, and how you can manage them and keep them comfortable in their environment. Leaving them shut up in a small pen and never letting them run and be goats or see a little sunlight occasionally, I don't recommend that at all. I think there's a time and a place to have them indoors. On a day when it's 120 here in the summer, certainly in shade or under a fan or even if you have the ability to have either a water cooler, some type of way to cool them off, that's ideal. Just keeping them in a small pen where they can't self-exercise, I don't necessarily condone that. I think they all need to be kicked out at some point in time and let them run. I want to keep their mind straight. I want to keep their mind right. We want to be able to work with them. And really, I think the way to do that is to have a positive environment. I tell a lot of, you can keep a kid in the classroom for so long, but sometimes they need recess. And if you'll liken that to your own child, it's a good way to make sure you get enough self-exercise, enough out time, enough downtime from any species of livestock. I think that's ideal.
This kind of relates to bedding as well. Somebody asked if you have a recommendation for shavings, whether it be pelleted or a flake.
Clean, I think, is the most important. I would tell you. I think that's the first and foremost importance. Whichever one's the cleanest, your air quality is the cleanest. You don't feel like you picked up mites or lice or something through that. I think that's the most important thing on choosing those.
We bedded ours on. We bedded ours on caliche rock, packed limestone, cedar fiber, pellet shavings, and then high quality small flake, very clean pine shavings. We landed on the latter as the best option. We're able to keep them cleaner. We're able to keep them fresher. Their skin and hair looks better. And I think the air quality in our barn is the best on the small flake, high quality pine shavings that we have.
I would say we use the same one. And I think as leg hair becomes of as much importance as what it has been, keeping those cleaned out. We clean ours, weekly. And try to keep them clean and fresh and dry for your fungus as much as anything as well, and those kind of things. So I would say that's what we do too.
So one of the most popular questions since we've, touched on exercise is, how do you guys feel about sprinting the goats uphill or hills?
We have an oval track that we can utilize, and it's essentially level ground. We have a straight track where they actually do not turn. We take them to the one end and actually run them back a quarter mile back to the house, and that track runs uphill halfway and then downhill halfway. And I don't think that's a bad thing, actually. And running uphill as far as you sprinting is something that can be good. I say the reality is we're trying to maybe minimize bulk up front and maximize shape plus health from the shoulder back. And sometimes if you ask them to pull things or stress them pulling weights or running them maybe too vertical on their front end, you can bulk them up in terms of shoulder. And that's not going to, for most judges, that's not going to be a quality that they, or an attribute that they gravitate towards. That would be something that they would talk about as a negative. So it would depend on how aggressively uphill you're exercising. You also don't want to do something that's going to hurt them. We have a lot, they can get hurt doing anything, and you don't want to do something that's going to strain or stress some of their joint work and actually cause an injury.
Yeah, that's like toys in the pen. I wouldn't recommend any kind of toys or anything like that for them just to get hurt on. All that is.
Hate them. No toys. No rocks.
Perfect. Had a couple questions on, so this was, at what age do you recommend treadmilling and how many minutes each interval?
For ours, it's not an age. I'll tell you what we do. It's not an age. It's just when they get smooth, they've got some condition on them. I'm going to say roughly we're looking at maybe teach them to treadmill between 3 and 4 months, and maybe seriously treadmill on them 4 or 5 months, 6 months, maybe. It really depends on when you feed, the type of goat you purchased, and how far it is till your show. I know a lot of people northeast of us throughout some states. I mean, they're showing 6-month-old goats, 5-month-old goats at 100 pounds. Well, they're going to need to exercise considerably earlier than what we would. We're going to feed our goats 10, 11, 12 months. And, we may not exercise ours hardcore until they're 9 months old. We've allowed their muscle to develop. We've allowed their structure and their general build to develop slowly. And then we can stress them a little more as they're a little more mature. So I'd say that's really depending on when you're going to need to show and how. Some goats, frankly, don't need exercise at all because they never get fat enough to exercise. And some need exercise, early and maturing ones. They could be exercised as early as 3 to 4 months old, I'd say. Cooper, what are your thoughts there?
I would say similar. It's to the goat as much as anything, and your time period that you're working with, and you got to have enough condition on them. I would tell you that we probably try to get condition on ours so that we can start treadmilling, and it may be for 2 minutes. By the end, we may be at 4 minutes or so. But we start them early. We try to treadmill. We try to be consistent with it as soon as we can. It's not about how long at that point. It's about making sure they're broke and stretch those muscles and expand them and get blood flow going. And then I think that also whenever you can start exercising, no different than any human that I've ever met, whenever you exercise, you do a workout, it helps with appetite. It makes you hungry and keeps everything kind of rolling. So, I guess that would be our mindset is do a light workout as soon as we can. But it's not about trying to burn everything off of them as it is just increase blood flow and kind of keep them on a routine there to keep expanding those muscles. And that just gives you more time to build and bulk.
In a backwards treadmill scenario, I'd say 3 to 4 minutes. Once you've worked them up to that, that's probably where you need to be. If you're forward exercising for various reasons or need to, 5 to 8 minutes maybe going forward on a treadmill. When we sprint ours, we don't sprint them longer than about 90 seconds. And that's a session that's about all that they need, typically, about 90 seconds of a hard run forward when we actually take them out.
Perfect. Well, I think we have one more question and then we'll probably call it a night. Is there a period of time you should wait between feeding muscle and motion and swell? Cooper?
No, you can feed them together. That's not a product that's going to harm. You're feeding muscle and motion to try to get one, chubbier and more expansive, more dimensional behind their shoulder. And you're feeding swell there to try to maybe potentially smooth them up. from their back and from their last rib back and drop some belly in them. So they can be utilized together.
Okay. Well, with that being said, I don't see any more active questions in the chat. And if there are, we can certainly come back and answer those. Really appreciate Cooper, Glenn, and Rob getting on here. It was a pleasure. And I really appreciate all 200 to 300 people that were able to get on here and join. So thank you guys. Drop in the comments if you'd like to see more of these. We can definitely try to make that happen. We've definitely got a busy team, but we also always want to be able to help our customers out.
Absolutely. Thank you all for everyone that was in attendance.
Have a good night.